me.
Hello, I'm Nancy Glass. Welcome to Inside Edition. Bill O'Reilly is on assignment. Do you believe in werewolves? If you ask that question in a small town in Wisconsin, don't be surprised if the answer is yes. Something strange is going on up there, and we'll tell you about it a little later on. But first, we've been investigating dangers at shopping malls across the country. It turns out that random acts of violence are becoming more common at malls. Wisconsin Woods. Is it a werewolf?
Hey, Glow! Get back!
That thing, that was no dog. That was too big to be a dog. That thing was bigger than me.
There is something going on in the woods of Wisconsin. It isn't Bigfoot, but it is a mysterious beast, and enough people have seen it to know it exists. But what is it? We asked Joe Loy to find out.
I told my mom I thought I saw a werewolf, and my mom believed me.
I was walking along a good probably 7 to 10 seconds before it had turned its head.
That thing, that was no dog. That was too big to be a dog. That thing was bigger than me.
That thing was stalking cornfields, jumping on cars, and feasting on roadkill. For 2 years, people in Elkhorn, Wisconsin whispered about a king-sized creature who roamed Bray Road.
It had really big claws. It was holding its roadkill like it had elbows, and it was kneeling on 2 knees, like a human being might do.
Eerie stories like that prompted Linda Godfrey, a reporter and cartoonist, to investigate. It was all just too bizarre not to be for real.
When you live in a small town and you say you've seen something that looks like a dog man or a wolf man, you know, you're going to get some ridicule, and they did. So they had no reason to say this.
Despite the ridicule, beast believers came forward in Godfrey's Beast of Bray Road article, like Doris Gibson, who'd seen it on Halloween night 1991. Driving down Bray Road, she had gotten out of her car when she thought she had hit an animal.
It was foggy out, and I was a little bit afraid. And this big thing come just like trucking, you know? Just trucking down the road at me, man. I looked at it, and I'm like, ah! And I ran, I got back in the car. You know, and before I peeled off, that thing scratched the back of the car.
Tom Brichta's car was also scratched by the creature from Bray Road.
My adrenaline started pumping. I was scared.
But this is a creature that likes to cross county lines. Tom saw it twice on Route 106.
We were having a good time and stuff. We were singing to the oldies and jamming out and stuff. And then all of a sudden I noticed this on the side of the road.
He was big, and he looked intimidating. I was scared of his appearance.
Back on Bray Road, Lori Andreezy remembers her close encounter with the creature in 1990.
I saw it kneeling on the side of the road, and it was eating something. And I came up from behind it, and I slowed down because I thought it was a person at first. So I came up from behind it, and I realized it wasn't a person when I saw its pointy ears.
From those descriptions, Linda drew up this composite picture of the beast. All agreed it was very big, with pointy ears and broad-chested with a shaggy coat, streaked with silver, gray, or black.
It had brought its right hand up, stopped, looked over by the car, real nonchalant, and made eye contact with both Scott and I, and gave like this sneer, like it was challenging us. Like, you know, what are you going to do about it? You know, I'm here, you're there. I'm bigger than you are. You can't do anything about it.
But with all the sightings, no one knew if it was man, beast, or even a combination of the two. One person simply called it God's mistake.
I would assume that what they saw was some sort of an animal, probably dog-like in nature, either a loose dog or a coyote.
I just said, it's a big animal, and it's upset. It's really upset.
If werewolves do exist, this is probably a werewolf.
Hey, what are you doing?
Once the W word was spoken, werewolf mania broke out in Elkhorn. T-shirts were gobbled up, and personal capture permits were issued courtesy of Hairy Face. Even the local bakery made Beast of Bray Road cookies, touting them as werewolf cookies that will make you howl. Letters came pouring in. One in particular sent chills down Linda's spine.
He said it was too large to be a wolf. It had a terribly unkempt look to its fur, wild, not normal.
Elaine Bushman was describing what her husband Robert had witnessed in 1991. The Bushmans live in St. Nazian and were just passing through town when Robert spied the creature. They knew nothing of the beastly tales that haunted Elkhorn.
I've never seen anything that would be dirty enough and for some reason or other scary enough to make you feel the hair lift up on your arms, you know?
So, is it a dog, coyote, or werewolf? Believe what you will, but just remember, it's here, just waiting.
While no formal reports were made to the Elkhorn police, the department did get some teasing from other police departments in the state, giving them a hard time about being the home of the werewolf. Coming up as Inside Edition continues, we'll go behind the scenes on the Jackie Thomas Show. And next, it has happened again, a controversy over a young model and her Calvins.
During the 1990s, reports of creatures that look like werewolves were beginning to rise across the United States. One of the most famous cases was the Beast of Bray Road that was investigated by Linda Godfrey. Fast forward 30 years in the year 2021, many Americans have heard the famous Wisconsin werewolf legend. While many Americans are aware of the Wisconsin werewolf legend, many are unaware of a werewolf legend in Texas. In this episode, I will explore one of San Antonio's oldest legends, the Converse Werewolf. I am your host, Streetlight Historian, and this is the Hidden Histories of San Antonio, Texas. In folklore, a werewolf, or occasionally a lycanthrope, is a human with the ability to shapeshift into a wolf, either purposely or after being placed under a curse or affliction, with a transformation occurring on the night of a full moon. Many werewolf legends can be found across the world, from Asia to Europe, from the Middle East to Africa, from South America to North America. Before European colonization of North America, many Native American tribes would tell stories of shapeshifters that would turn into wolves called skinwalkers. Other tribes would talk about bipedal wolves that were seen as protectors or destroyers of the lands they lived on. During American colonization period from 1492 to 1776, many of the European folklore was transported into North America, and new tales of werewolves started to grow. One of the most famous folklore tales of werewolves came from the German immigrants who told stories of cursed people who would become shapeshifters during a full moon. Many of these folklore stories will inspire the many werewolf movies that have been produced since the early 20th century. While in today's American society promotes the idea that werewolves are just myth, some Americans believe that these creatures still exist. Many point to the Beast of Bray Road case that Miss Linda Godfrey investigated back in the 1990s. Her conclusion shocked many Americans when she revealed that due to the high amount of eyewitness accounts, tracks that she examined, and examining Elkhorn, Wisconsin's Police Department's official werewolf archive files, that the creature many people were seeing was indeed real. She even went further to state that the creature many people were seeing might possibly be a cryptid and should be given a new name, since this creature has been both seen at night or day. This made the Beast of Bray Road become a famous modern American werewolf legend. While the Wisconsin werewolf legend has been known to many, one werewolf legend in San Antonio, Texas is only known by a few within the Converse community. While there are variations of the Converse werewolf legend, the one I will choose comes from author Michael Mays. The legend begins around the mid to late 1800s, when Converse was just a small farming community. Inside this farming community, a rancher moved onto a plot of land near what is now known as Converse. The man was a rugged sort who had grown up in true pioneer fashion. Some versions of the tale suggest he was a military combat veteran who moved to the area to put the horrors of the Civil War behind him. This man had a son who was something of a disappointment to him. The lad was frail and bookish and preferred studying to wrangling and hunting. This frustrated the old rancher to no end, and he decided to make a man out of the boy. The rancher decided to send the boy out hunting. He hoped that the boy would take a liking to the sport, and that after making his first kill, would prefer the more manly activity over studying and reading. The old man put a long rifle in the boy's hands and instructed him to go hunt and shoot a deer. The family needed meat. He directed the boy to hunt a heavily wooded area along the creek called Skull Crossing. The boy was reluctant at first and resisted, but one way or another, he was finally coerced into going. The old rancher watched with high hopes as his son trekked away from the homestead towards the woods. The old man would soon be disappointed, however, as his son returned a few hours later empty-handed. When chastised for returning without any game, the boy told his father that he left the area out of fear, as he had spotted and been stalked by a monster resembling a werewolf. The father merely dismissed this wild story and threatened his son into returning to the area to finish his hunt, or else face his wrath. The boy did not want to go, but his father left him no choice. Trembling and fearful, the boy trudged back out to the anonymously named area of Skull Crossing. Little did the old rancher know it would be the last time he would see his son alive. Hours passed and darkness began to fall. The old man, as the story goes, began to worry and had second thoughts about sending his inexperienced son into the woods alone. While he hoped the reason the boy had not returned was that he had yet to make a kill, he began to have a sinking feeling deep within his guts that something was wrong. Deciding not to wait any longer, the rancher rounded up some of his neighbors and they made their way towards the wooded area near Skull Crossing in hopes of finding his boy. What they found upon arriving there is the stuff of nightmares. The search party happened upon a monstrous, hairiest creature hunched over the body of the rancher's son. The beast was in fact acting ravenously, devouring the boy when discovered. His man got off a few shots at the monster, but it bounded away at lightning speeds. The werewolf, as it was dubbed, was described as standing between 8 to 9 feet tall and covered in dark hair or fur. Members of the search party described it as being some kind of unholy combination between wolf and man. The old rancher was understandably devastated by the death of his boy. He blamed himself for not believing his son's story and believed he sent him to his doom by forcing him to return to the Skull Crossing to complete his hunt. Some versions of the tale say that the rancher died shortly thereafter. Some versions say he became reclusive, refused to eat, and wasted away. Others say that he committed suicide by setting fire to his own home and burned to death. Either way, the legend ends in tragedy and became a warning to the community on Converse to beware of the werewolf that lived in the woods of Skull Crossing near Converse. Upon further research into this fascinating legend, I stumbled across something much bigger than what I had initially expected. The Converse Werewolf legend was just one of the many hill country werewolf legends that ranged from the mid-1800s to early 1920s. A couple of decades later, after the Converse Werewolf encounter, in the early 1900s, stories of large humanoid dogs or wolves began to surface within the townfolk of Bertram and the surrounding communities. Soon after, a small group of railroad workers simply disappeared without a trace. Many of the townsfolk of Bertram believed that these mysterious creatures played a role in their disappearance. In Kimball County, just 120 or so miles from Bertram, the story of a tombstone carved N.Q. Patterson, whose rocks carving of one particular large image, a face with broad nose, glinting eyes, and snarling mouth with long, fang-like teeth, made people take notice. What did the face represent? Some have said the face reminds them of a wild bear. Some believed for years the carving was made by Indians, but according to local accounts, the face was indeed carved by Mr. Patterson himself. Who or what is represented is still anyone's guess. In some of the Texas folklore, some say there is a legend around parts of the hill country that tells of an old Indian man who would change his shape in order to avoid capture by cavalrymen stationed in the area. Legend has it that when cornered, the old man would assume the shape of a wolf and attack his pursuers, often resulting in death or serious injury. But by the 1920s, all stories of wolfmen in central Texas area had all but disappeared. A final sighting in the late 50s, 300 miles from Bertram, is the last we see of this type of sighting. On a July 9th in 1958, Miss Delbert Gregg was getting ready for bed in her Greggton, Texas home when she glanced out the window. Thunderstorms were on the way when a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the countryside. She saw a horrifying sight outside her open window. It was a huge, shaggy, wolf-like creature that was clawing at the screen and glaring at her with baleful, glowing, slitted eyes. Back in the year 2020, when I was doing some historical research on the School of Aerospace Medicine, also known as SAM, at Brooks Air Force Base, I had an opportunity to meet a couple of veterans who worked at Brooks Air Force Base during the time that SAM was stationed there. Many of these veterans worked as enlisted personnel and came from different backgrounds. As I was writing their accounts, some of them wanted to talk to me personally about some interesting experiences they had while being stationed at Brooks Air Force Base. I agreed to their request and promised them I would not mention their names and keep them anonymous. One of the veterans told me his account of what happened to him while he was taking a small vacation at East Lake, now known as Browning Lake Park, in the 1980s. While camping at this park, he had an encounter that he will never forget. One day, while preparing a barbecue grill at his campsite, he heard the loudest wolf howl he had ever heard in his entire life. The howling was so powerful, he claimed that his entire body was vibrating. He looked at where the howling was coming from and saw something standing in the clearing. A couple 100 feet from where he stood was an 8-foot-tall bipedal wolf with glowing eyes looking directly at him. The veteran froze in fear at what he was seeing. Suddenly, this creature began walking towards him. Due to his fear, he stood completely still, trying to figure out an escape plan. The creature stopped in his tracks when it was just 3 feet from the veteran. Since the creature was close, he was able to see better detail of what the creature looked like. This creature was jet black, had pointy ears, had a head of a wolf, was definitely bipedal, had arms, legs, and claws on its hands, and had a black, bushy tail. He also could tell that it was a male and was very muscular. When he looked at the creature's eyes, the veteran claimed that the glowing eyes' colors were amber. He also claimed that by looking at the eyes, he could sense this creature was not only sentient, but also humanly intelligent. It soon came into his mind that this creature that looked like a werewolf was trying to decide what to do with him. The creature came close to his face and began to sniff at him. After smelling him, the creature stood back and humanly nodded at him. The veteran claimed that after nodding at him, he could have sworn that the creature smiled at him in a cheerful mood. Before the veteran could ask anything to this mysterious creature, he heard another howl that sounded feminine. The creature turned around and looked at the clearing where the howling was coming from. The veteran claimed that he saw a female-like creature that was at the clearing calling the male. The male creature turned around, gave one last smile to the veteran, and began to run back to the clearing. Once the male creature was with the female creature, they both ran into the woods, never to be seen again by the eyewitness. For about a couple of minutes, the veteran just kept staring at the woods, trying to comprehend what had just happened. After standing there for what felt like 30 minutes, the veteran backed up to his camping equipment and headed back to Brooks Air Force Base. The veteran decided to keep his encounter a secret for fear of being ridiculed, but also fear for losing his job in the United States military. The eyewitness told me that in his personal opinion, the reason why the creature did not attack him and basically nod at him with a smile was due to his respect for both nature and the creatures that lived on that land. He had kept his secret for 40 years after having that encounter back in the 1980s. It wouldn't be until around the 2020s that he decided to come forward with his account. After hearing this veteran's story, I decided to dig a little bit deeper into figuring out what people were reporting for the past 150 years here in Texas. What I found was that the Converse Werewolf and other reported sightings in Texas are not shape-shifting creatures, but something else completely different. The cryptozoological community has a name for this creature, and they call it Dogman. The theory is that there is a bipedal humanoid wolf-like creature that has been on this planet since the dawn of human civilization. The cryptozoological community also theorizes that these dogmen or wolfmen may have inspired the werewolf folklore throughout history. Is it possible that these creatures exist? After examining my own investigations, historical research, and interviewing eyewitnesses, I am open to the idea that these dogmen are real, making the Converse Werewolf legend truly a hidden history of San Antonio, Texas. My one final advice I have for you, the viewers of this episode, is that if these creatures are indeed real, it is best to respect these creatures and leave them in peace, for they are truly powerful cryptids that are both sentient and have human intelligence, like ourselves.